I'm Marisa Norcross.
And I'm Dave Freund, and this is The Next Page. Marisa, how you doing today?
I'm good. It's a beautiful day. I have to comment again because it wouldn't be a podcast if I didn't. But,
last week it was raining.
Yes. Today, it looks like it's threatening rain right now, but it was still
It is, but
gorgeous.
How warm was it outside today?
70 something, I think, right?
Wow,
was
so
the high
we are
77?
in fall.
Mm-hmm.
We are technically in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's great. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Central New York, no place like it. Anywhere. Just this is the place to be.
Ask me that in a few months.
Yeah, well, no, I will. Last night, engineer Tim and I were watching something on TV, and there's this has nothing to do with the podcast, but I'm going to share it anyways. There's this show that Motor Trend runs, like they live stream it, called Roadkill, which sounds awful, but it's just about these guys that find these old vehicles and they get them running. But anyway, so they found this old tow truck. And this one picture is this, and the guys are in Colorado, and they get up in the morning, and there is snow blowing everywhere. And Tim says to me, "Oh, isn't that just exciting? I can't wait." Now, you know me. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not ready for that yet. But it'll come, and it'll be exciting. It'll be fun.
Yeah. I've said it on here before. I love the transition of seasons.
Right.
So I do think that the winter snow is exciting for some period of time. But when it's
not 4 months.
When it's Mother's Day and snowing,
and it's
like
still
this
snowing,
year,
yes.
that I do have a problem with that.
But here's the good news: if it snows on Mother's Day, it doesn't last long.
Maybe.
If it snows on Martin Luther King Day, now we know we've got probably 2 to 3 more months of that.
Yeah.
Mother's Day, it's gone within a day. But
it's always beautiful on Father's Day. I think that's why I have a problem with it.
Okay. Well, you just flip them. Work with somebody and get it flipped so that Father's Day comes before Mother's Day, and then somebody's going to say, wait, isn't it ladies first? Oh, well. And right now our listeners are saying, could you just please get back to what you're talking about today? So today we are part 2 on our 4 dimensions of leadership. So last week we talked about inside out. That's where the leader really has to develop themselves. They need to, you have to be bigger on the inside than you are on the outside. You can't give what you don't have. So all of those great Maxwell quotes that you've heard me use so many times. But this week, it's outside in.
Mm-hmm.
So what this one really focuses on is, and I honestly believe that after the leader has focused on developing themselves, the next most important thing they should be working on is developing their people.
Mm-hmm.
This is hands down the most important thing any leader can do. Now, I know some are going to say, no, I should be working on my markets. No, I should be working on my processes. No, I should be working on my strategic plan. No, listen to me. You should be working on developing your people. Because if you do, your people will take your business to another level, a level far beyond you. And one of the notes that I put in the post that went out today was that, the goal for most leaders think, well, it's great if I have followers. Well, if you have followers, you're very limited in what you can achieve because your followers are always dependent on you. But if you develop leaders who develop followers, now look at what we're doing. Mm-hmm. We've got exponential possibilities in our organizations. I was on a coaching call with a client yesterday, and he seemed to be a little bit overwhelmed, and rightfully so, about how do I make the impact that I need to make in my organization. And he's doing a phenomenal job. But I said, well, why don't you think about who are your rising stars, so to speak? Who are your most gifted people in areas where you don't have the capacity? Who might they be? And he says, well, yeah, I probably have, and I forgot. I think some of the names I may have remembered, others I didn't, and that's not important. But I said, so what could you do with them? could you mentor them? And then the point is, if he starts to mentor them and discover their giftedness and then show them how to do the same, the next thing you know, it's working its way throughout the entire organization of people development. And that's outside in. So the other thing that I brought up in the post that went out was, and we'll get into exactly what this means, but when I was on a school board, I didn't know much about education other than the fact that my kids, went through school, but I didn't understand the structure of education. And I learned a lot when I was on the school board. And one of them was they kept talking about IEPs. I didn't know what an IEP was, so I just kind of like, hey, what's an IEP? Well, an IEP is an individualized education program. Oh, well, that's pretty cool. But they only were doing it for students that were struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, wait, why wouldn't I want to have an IEP for each one of the people that report to me at work? Because if our goal is to make our people better, we should have an individualized education program for each of our employees. So that's what outside in is. Identifying the people, identifying their giftedness, identifying how we can help them achieve greatness. Liz Wiseman referred to it as we need to be genius makers. Finding that genius and developing them. So that's really what this outside in is all about. And the last thing I put on the email that went out today was, if you want to know more about it, tune into the podcast. And Marisa and I are going to talk about how we build an IEP. So share with us, how do we do that?
Well, I thought you were going to tell us.
See, that was one of those questions that I didn't tell you I was going to ask, right?
You make it seem so simple, which we know it's not, right? I mean, it's, right. I'm starting to understand, like, this is a 4-part series, and I'm seeing where we're going now that I've read a couple of the pieces. But it makes great sense to me. And I think
sure,
it's, you and I were just actually on a webinar with MACNY's Innovator of the Year for 2020, Daniel Brown from SRC. Right. And it was a really, really great interview and discussion with him. And he shared some advice that it's really, and he's young himself. I don't know how old he is, yes, but I don't think he's much older than I am. And he had some really great things to say and some really great advice. And he said that, it's not about making yourself, what do you say, irreplaceable or something like that.
Yes.
He said that it's about, taking others under your wing and developing them to a point where they're just as good as you. And
exactly.
I thought, and he said, the way he said it with such confidence and such, like he was, he's like, I know this for sure. Like, this is the truth.
Yep.
And I just thought, that's so timely, first of all, because here we are recording now. But like, that's, right. You think about all of the teams we're on, that's really how it should be, right? Like at work and at home, right? You take your kids and you turn them into great, contributing adults. And you think about sports teams and all of that. And it's like, this makes great sense. And I love that we're talking about the individualized approach, because I think that's the key right there. It's not a one size fits all plan, because everyone's different. Everyone has different gifted areas and different strengths. And even if they were hired for one reason, their longevity is likely for something else.
Yes.
That comes out later on.
Exactly. That's so good. So if someone wanted to hear or watch the interview we did with Dan Brown from SRC, where would they find that?
It's on our YouTube channel. So MACNY has a YouTube. It'll also be on our website, macny.org.
Great.
And we'll have all of our events there.
Perfect. So just go to our MACNY's YouTube channel and you can find it there. That's great. Thank you so much for bringing that up, because I almost cheered when he said that. There were a couple times in in our conversation with I wanted to cheer, but that would have been
that would have been funny.
But anyways, so let's look at, I want to talk first about a typical performance management cycle or event. So typically when in industry, the way we did performance management, we called them performance appraisals or employee reviews. We focused on what was going wrong. We said, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, in this area, you're a 7. And in this area, you're an 8. In this area, you're a 3. So we need to work on the 3. And we need to get that 3 to a 5. Well, so if 5 is average, we just said that our goal is to get that employee to be average. So we want average companies, I guess. And Marcus Buckingham said it the best. He said, we fear our weaknesses more than we honor our strengths. And he doesn't know why. He said, why is it that we're so fearful of our weaknesses and we don't honor our strengths? And the example that he used at Live to Lead last year was, he said, he gave this beautiful example, and it just went, even just thinking about it, I start to get emotional. He talks about when he went with his wife to open house for the first time, and he was so almost embarrassed by the artwork that his son was doing. And then the teacher noticed it and said, come over here. He said, and then we all of a sudden went up to where the math problems were posted. And he said, look at what your son did here. And it was, some simple mathematics. He said, we haven't done that yet in class. And the point was, the teacher said, stop focusing on what your child doesn't do well and start to ask him, why does he do this so well? So the point is, discover the giftedness in your children and help them develop that. Discover the giftedness in your employees and help them develop that. Because if we only work on where our deficiencies are, we're only going to be average. The example, Marissa, that I always give on this is me and proofreading. Now, you edit everything that I write, and I tell people, if you have ever read anything that I write, with the exception of a personal email, Marissa has read it and edited it first, because I'm awful at it. But you're gifted in that area. So if I would, I don't even know, maybe I've said it on the podcast, I actually have that Grammarly app that sits on my PC in Outlook and in Word that is doing a bunch of grammar checks. And then you still find some that it missed, which is great. And, so here was something, and I don't know if I've ever told you this. When I first started working at MACNY and you started editing my things, I would have Tim, my son, and my wife read it before you edited it, because I didn't want to look stupid. Now I guess I don't care if I act stupid, right? Because what I realized was, that's not my giftedness. So, and if I would go back to night school, or do they even do night school anymore? I don't know. If I would take all these online grammar courses, at best I would be average. So why not give it to somebody who's gifted in that? So that's what I mean by this, finding strengths. And so why are strengths so important? Because our strengths ignite us. They inspire us. We're passionate about our strengths. And when we get to work on our strengths, people grow. So that's why we need to, there was another great quote here, and I love this one. The most beautiful gift a leader can give their people is to help them find their strengths. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Find and then develop, right?
Exactly. Yes. Because you know what? If you help them find their strengths, but you don't let them develop them, they're gone. And you deserve it. You deserve it. So you got to help them develop their strengths. So how do we build an IEP? You got to get to know your team members. You have to do a lot of observation, to have conversations with them. Their giftedness might not be in the task they're doing for you. It might be in a hobby that they're engaged in that can be brought over into the business setting. It was interesting when we asked Dan Brown, our Innovator of the Year award, how did he get started in engineering or something? He talked about, as a kid, he was always building things. I was doing a phone call with someone this past week, and the question was, I said, so what kind of skills would you be looking for in a person who, a high school student that would fit your type of job? And he goes, somebody that can fix their own cars.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe someone's giftedness is they're extremely mechanically inclined, but they don't think about it because they don't have the shop classes in school like they used to. And nobody fixes their own cars anymore because they are harder to fix than they used to be. But so hobbies could be an indicator of a giftedness. What are their strengths? What do they want to do or like to do? But not, I just really want to do this, but are you good at it? Are you gifted in that area? So once we identify that, then we have to say we need to identify learning and growth opportunities that would build on that giftedness. So if someone comes to me and says, I think one of the things that Dan Brown was talking about was, developing different kind of computer algorithms and things. So if that's where his giftedness is, his company was helping him develop that skill set to get even better and better and better, so that the things he and the folks at SRC do are really keeping us all safe and protecting our armed forces. So now, we know where the giftedness is. We've identified the source or the avenues for people to get better, the training that's there, the way to utilize it. But then we have to establish, and this you'll see the parallel here, Marissa, with our growth plan. What do we do daily, weekly, monthly, and annually that reinforce the growth?
Mm-hmm.
It can't just be every quarter we do a one-on-one and we talk about it. No, there needs to be things that this employee is doing daily that moves them in that direction. And then you have to review those activities frequently. I don't think a one-on-one quarterly is going to cut it. Maybe every other week, maybe every week if you can make that work. And it doesn't have to be super formal. It could just be, hey, we're touching base on what's going on. But at least quarterly, you need to be looking at the plan. And this plan could be one page. It could be half a page. This is what we're doing. And you're going to see the growth of this employee. And the more simple you can make the document, the better. Because if it gets too complex, nobody will follow it. So it's not hard to build an IEP. Just think about the fact that it is an individualized education plan for each employee. You have to give them the chance to become the best at what they do. And that is the leader's greatest responsibility. You can't cut yourself. You can't cut your business to sustain growth. You can't be cutting costs and to a point where you're sustaining growth. You can't lean your way out. You could have the best Six Sigma people in the world. That's not going to necessarily take you to growth. You can't inspire or motivate people for long-term business success and growth. The way you do it is by growing your people in their giftedness, and they will take your company to sustained exponential growth. So that's IEPs and how they work.
Mm-hmm.
Questions for me?
This just reminds me of a story. I think you've told it on the podcast before about your dad and developing a specific employee. Do you think you can share that story again?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks for remembering that. Yeah, I got to a point once where I had an employee that was really, really gifted. I was working at Volpe, and I was the production manager for the production side of that business. And I had a woman who was an amazing technician doing fiber optic assemblies. And I needed a team leader. And I remember saying to my dad, because I was I might have only been a supervisor then. I was very new at leading people. And I said to him, I got this dilemma. He goes, well, what's up? And I told him, And his answer shocked me. And my dad's amazing at giving you an answer that stops you in your tracks, makes you think, and then he's going to give you the rest of the story.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, it is immoral for you to hold a person back for your own personal gain. And I'm like, whoa, wait, immoral, my own personal gain? What are you talking about? And he knew that my point was, if I would promote her, I knew that it would create a hole that I would have to fill as an assembler. So it really was, I was watching out for me, not just the company. And then his immoral part was, he said, you're holding her back from growing. That's wrong. And then he said, so do you have a minute? And so I sat down, and he said to me, when he was plant manager of a company on Erie Boulevard, there was a young man that was working in his shipping and receiving department. He goes, and he was this really sharp young guy, ended up becoming like the supervisor in the shipping and receiving department. And he said, one day the guy came into my dad's office and he said, Bob, I need to make more money. And my dad said, well, what? Excuse me, what? He goes, I need to make more money. I want to get married. How can I make more money? And so my dad said, you are the best shipper we've ever had, and I've given you the biggest raise possible. You've maxed out at what that pay scale is for that job. What else can I learn? Teach me something. I need to learn something. I need to make more money. So my dad thought, and he goes, do you want to learn how to weld? And I don't even know if the guy knew what that was. So my dad takes him to the welding department of the company. He shows him, he goes, yes, where can I learn how to weld? So my dad said, I'll tell you what, BOCES runs these courses every spring and every fall, and I'll send you to BOCES. It's night school. I'll pay for it, but you got to go, and we'll teach you how to weld. So young man goes, he gets married, goes to the BOCES class, learns how to weld. He's doing some welding for my dad, just some simple welding, probably some stick welding or MIG welding or something. And then he comes back to my dad and he says, hey, there's this other kind of welding that I'd like to do. And my dad said, sure, no problem. Sends him to the course, learns how to do that welding. And then a couple years later, he comes back into my dad's office and he's with a flyer from, I don't know if it was BOCES or somewhere else. And he said, Bob, there's a TIG welding class that I'd like to take. And my dad said to him, I don't know if his name was Jimmy, but Jimmy, we don't do TIG welding here. And he goes, I know, but I want to be the best welder I can be. And my dad said he was an amazing welder. He was very, very gifted in this area and just loved welding. He was, welding is something that if you're a really good welder, it's an art to be able to weld right and have it look really nice. And this kid was good. So my dad said, well, I need to think about this because, like I said, we don't do that kind of welding. So my dad said, come back the next day. And my dad knew that if he taught this guy how to TIG weld, he may not be able to keep him long term. And so sure enough, he sent him to the class. And about a year or two later, the young man comes into my dad's office and he just has this sad look on his face. And he says, Bob, and my dad stopped him and he goes, you're leaving, aren't you? And he goes, yeah. He said, there's this welding shop in town. I know you're paying me as much as you can pay me, but they can offer me significantly more money. I just need to go. And he says, I don't want to, but it's for my family. It's to make my life better. And so my dad wished him well. And I said, so you trained him to the point that he left? He goes, yeah. He said, I wanted him to be able to achieve his best, the best version of him. And I said, so you lost him? And he goes, oh, I didn't finish the story. I said, okay, so what's the rest of the story? And he goes, well, years later, my dad says to me, he was getting ready to retire from Jakewith Industries. And he had already, put in his notice that I think they convinced him to stay a few extra months because they were going to go through a union negotiation or something like that. And they wanted him there. And before my dad could leave, the HR manager said, hey, by the way, I want you to see a resume that just came in for a welder. I want you to put on the file, your successor is for sure going to need some welders. And when my dad looked down at the resume, it was this young man. And he said, you see, Dave, he said, had I stayed at Jakewood, this young man that I allowed to achieve his best, and I continued to let grow, would have come full circle back to where I was managing again.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you always help people achieve their giftedness and make the most of their giftedness. And he said, you never know. Now, I've also looked at it from the standpoint of they may end up going to another company that now becomes a customer of yours. They could become a vendor of yours. You know, the point is, if we're always trying to help people get better, everybody wins. And that's the power of outside-in leadership.
I love that story. I mean, I've heard it many times now, and it's still like it gives me chills when I hear it, because it's exactly what we all need to be doing. And it comes back to what you often say is that, you know, we're human beings, not human doings. And when we step back from thinking about the bottom line or our own personal gains or, you know, inconveniences or things like that, and really think about the human beings behind the job titles and helping them achieve their best. And that's, you know, that's where the focus really needs to be.
Exactly. You know, and I don't want people to think that Dave doesn't believe in capitalism and profits and earnings. I do.
Mm-hmm.
I just believe that the way you safeguard capitalism and the way you safeguard earnings and the way you safeguard your future is through people.
Mm-hmm.
And a rising tide lifts all boats. And so, you know, we have to stop giving direction and we have to start asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have to stop saying, this is how I want you to do it. And we have to say, how do you think is the best way to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And we need to, instead of focusing on, you know, most bosses shine a light on what isn't working. Leaders shine a light on what is working and ask the team member, why is that working so well? Because then we're leading people on a path of discovery where they can discover giftedness, they can discover ideas. And, you know, with what Dan Brown was telling us, they can come up with amazing things that save the lives of a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's the power of outside-in leadership. So that's it. It's not hard.
So
and the neat part
what's our next dimension?
So our next dimension is side by side,
mm-hmm.
which is really fun. Can't wait to talk about that one. Speaking of helping people achieve excellence, so we need to remind everybody of Live to Lead.
Yes, we're not that far away now.
It's coming up on October 9th.
Mm-hmm.
Starts from, you know, the stream starts at 9 a.m. So please, there will be a link in the podcast description. Follow that link so that you save yourself the $20 and you get it for $79 instead of $99. It will be amazing. It always is. And I just cannot wait to hear Alan Mullally talk about leadership, because he was the guy that turned Ford around, went from losing billions per year to turning a profit and being the only automaker in this country to not need a government bailout.
Wow.
American automaker not needing a bailout. So click on the link. Join me for Live to Lead.
Looking forward to it.
Anything exciting happening? I'm sorry, what was that?
I said I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to Live to Lead.
Yeah, I am too. It's one of my favorite. Now, it's not the most wonderful time of the year. That's a little later. But it's like lead. So think about this. You get Live to Lead. Then you get Thanksgiving. Then you get the most wonderful time of the year. So just saying, people.
Just saying.
Look at your calendars.
Yeah.
Start the holidays early with Live to Lead.
You know, and it's certainly going to be different than it has been in the past. But, you know, I think there are some aspects of it that might, you know, people might like even more. Than there's the 72-hour replay, and there's
exactly
some materials and resources and videos from last year.
Yep.
And you know, you get to enjoy it from wherever you are. So
right.
As beautiful as the lodge is, it is a bit of a trip for some people. So now it's kind of you can watch it from your couch. You can watch it from your office. You can, whatever.
And think about this. You can take the $79 and invest in yourself and Live to Lead, and you have it for 72 hours. And it starts streaming on a Friday morning at 9. That means you have the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Who in your family might enjoy watching some of the best thought leaders in the country?
Mm-hmm.
Just a thought. Maybe you can help your kids find some giftedness.
Mm-hmm.
So any plans for the weekend?
No, I mean, we're working through our fall bucket list, and
that's great.
I've heard from a few people like, "Oh, you're doing it again. You're doing it." Oh, yeah, we are doing it again. And now that my older daughter is, even older than she was last year, she's really into it. So we're
so excited,
moving right through. How about you?
Great. So I'm hoping I'm going to get out in the boat this weekend again.
You should.
The
because
old
it's going
boat
to be
is
gorgeous.
She's running amazing. It's just a beautiful sound
mm-hmm.
as we go down the lake. So there's nothing better than autumn boat rides in the Finger Lakes.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I'm Dave Freund.
I'm Marisa Norcross.
And this was The Next Page.